Hey guys, it's Nicole over at Two Chicks Quilting here in Ganado, Texas, and I am jumping on with you this Tuesday for our tips and tricks with two chicks. And if you can see on my face, I studied that and I was trying really hard not to screw it up, and I finally got it. So today I wanted to hop on to kind of hop back to the basics. I know that we have a ton of new quilters that are starting their journey with us here at Two Chicks, so I wanted to do my tips and tricks today over something that they might appreciate, they might not know, or even you as an advanced quilter might not know. So let's talk about needles. Let's talk about rotary blades, cutters, rulers, cutting mats, and what we can do to get that best possible outcome in our quilting journey. So first thing I want to talk about is needles. We have just a couple of different needles here with you. A couple that we carry are Microtex, which is a sharp needle. We have a universal needle, and then we have ballpoint needle. Now, of course, there are different sizes in those groups of needles, but today we're just going to talk about either it being Microtex, which is sharp, universal, or ballpoint. So that Microtex sharp needle, I would suggest we pretty much sew with that 24/7 whenever we're piecing a quilt. You're going to get the best outcome of stitching with a sharp needle. I say for the most part, it is a sharp needle, so it's going to go straight through those fibers. If you use a universal needle, which is in between the sharp and a ballpoint, sometimes you get that dancing of your stitches. So you're trying to sew that straight line and you'll see them kind of go like this, and they're not in a perfect straight line. If you get dancing of the stitches, like I like to call it, it's probably because you're using a universal needle and it's not going through the fibers. It's kind of going through the path of the fibers versus going just straight through them, which a sharp would do. Then you have your ballpoint, which is not a sharp, not in between, but it has more of a ball end of it, more of a rounded end, not as sharp. Those are going to be used for your t-shirt quilts, your knits, your satins, anything that you don't want to put a run in your fabric. You don't want to cut the fabric where it starts just unraveling. So Microtex, which is your sharp, your universal, which is in between, and then your ballpoint needle. So it always starts what needle to use, what size to use in your projects. Like I said, we for the most part use a Microtex unless we have a certain fabric that we're sewing on. And they have jean needles and embroidery needles and non-stick needles, and the list goes on, but those three are the most important that I want to go over with you today. Another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is making sure you're putting your needle in correctly. I know that's a little bit of a giggle to say, and we're all laughing because one, either we think we're really smart and that's never going to happen to us, or two, we think we're really smart and it did happen to us. And then we're like, oh, that's such a silly mistake. I had my needle in backwards. Most of our domestic machines, long arms are a little bit different, but most of our domestic machines, it has a rounded front and a flat back. So I always like to remember flat to the back, flat to the back. So that means that I'm putting the flat side to the back. So flat to the back, rounded to the front. Another thing that I like to point out is on the front of the needle, which is the rounded side, there is a slit. It's very hard to see on camera, but if you run your fingernail in the front, there is a slit that is in the front of the needle. That is a little groove. So, nope, it's in the front. It's in the front of the needle. Ashley's like, it's in the back. Nope, that's your scarf, sweetie.
Oh, wrong
yeah.
line.
So the front, it's a little, if you can only do it, yep, with your nail. There's a little slit that runs in front of the needle. That is a guide for your thread to fall in there. Now, on the back of the needle, you have an indention, a small indention, in which that is called the scarf, and that is where your hook for your bobbin hits your needle, or doesn't hit your needle. So flat to the back, round it to the front. Then you have your scarf, which is your little indention that's on the back of the needle, and you can't really see it. You have to run your thumbnail or something in the front, and there's a little slit in the front where it's a guide for the thread to go in. So that's what I'm going to talk about needles. If you're getting a popping noise, skip stitches, anything like that, always change your needles because that could help that. Let's talk about rotary cutters. Okay, so there's 1,010,000 different rotary cutters that we sell here at the shop that you can buy from different quilt shops. So I just wanted to talk to you about rotary cutters. How often do you change your blade? Is there a for sure answer to that? Absolutely not. It just depends on how much you're cutting at home, what type of condition your mat is in, how you're cutting, what you're cutting with, different things like that. I will say that if you have shredding of your fabric, skipped cutting of your fabric, fraying, anything like that, definitely change your blade. You do not want to use the pizza cutter method with your cutter. This is a fabric cutter, not a pizza cutter. You should be able to press and do it in one stroke and it cut all the way through. The next thing that I want to point out is make sure you're putting your cutter back on correctly. You are only grabbing one blade at a time, and when you are changing your blade, make sure you are cleaning your cutter, because any of this little lint or anything like that can definitely get caught in that blade and can cause issues later on. Get this back in together just really quickly. I think I did that backwards. I don't use this cutter. Sorry, guys. Okay. There we go. So make sure you're changing your blade when you're supposed to and you're cleaning your cutter properly. You have one blade in there at a time, because I have done that before where I've accidentally put two blades in there without me knowing, and I was getting like wonky cutting, and I'm like, I just changed this. What is going on? It's because I had two blades in there. So just be very careful about that. So that's going to be about our cutter. The next thing I want to talk about is our mats. Now, I've brought this mat out because it's a very worn mat. Be cautious when you are cutting on your mat and having to use your mat for measurement. We're going to talk about rulers too in a second, about how cutting our fabric with the ruler measurements versus the mat measurements. But when you have to cut using your mat, bigger increments, 1/4 of a yard, 1/2 a yard, 3/4 of a yard, a yard and a half, when we're using the mat to do the cutting, make sure we're alternating places. Another thing is making sure we have a great blade on our rotary cutter, because the duller the blade, the harder we cut, the harder we are on our mat. So this all works together. New blade, when it needs it, is less force you have to put on your mat. We like to use these little ruler stickers to cut off of our ruler and to cut off of our mat. So what we do is, of course, we'll take the blues and we'll put one, or if we line it up with 0, it lines up with the end line. So that means it's yard from there to there. Then we get our pink ones and we move it down. So if we start at this one, and this is not going to work on this mat because this is only a 36-inch mat, but you get the picture. So if I start at that one, then I'm going to end at that 19 if I'm cutting only a 1/2 yard. So we use these stickers because it's easier for us to keep track. If I start here, I'm ending here, because sometimes we move that fabric down to that one and we cut on that 18 and we're an inch short because we forget we moved it down. So alternate your cutting patterns, so we're not constantly cutting at that 18-inch. Do we have any questions, Ashley?
No. Someone said great information earlier.
Yep. We try here at Two Chicks because most of the time, whatever we're teaching, we learn the hard way. Our saying here is, don't ask me how I know. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is our rulers that we cut with. This size being, I think this is the 6" or 6.5" by 24 versus if we use a 30 by 12" ruler, whatever ruler we're using, it doesn't matter. It's going to be the same concept. So your rulers have the increments on them too, the 1", 2", 3". Just like, can you see the grid work on my mat? It has the same things on my ruler. So what I like to say, rule of thumb, is my bigger cuts off my bolts, off my yardage of fabric, I cut with my mat. If I'm cutting smaller increments, I'm cutting with my ruler. So if I'm cutting 2.5" strips, instead of lining it up with the 2.5" mark and cutting 2.5", 5, 7.5, 10, and putting these grooves in my mat, I'm going to mark it on my ruler. So I have my 1, 2, 2.5. So I put a sticker there. I put a sticker here. And now when I'm cutting my fabric, no matter where it lands on my board, as long as it's straight, I can cut 2.5, move my ruler, 2.5, move my ruler, 2.5, move my ruler, 2.5, and go from there. It would actually be this way. If I'm cutting squares, strips, 5 yard by, I don't know, 9 rectangles, I'm going to always use my ruler as much as I can and set up my mat. That not only protects my mat and getting these gouges into it and, you know, rotating where I'm cutting at, but if I use my rulers on the cuts that I can use my rulers and go off of this instead of my mat, you're going to get that much accurate cutting. And I'll tell you what, cutting is so very important. It's the very first step that you're going to take when you do your quilt. And if you cut wrong, your piecing is going to be messed up. The matching of the locks are going to be messed up. So the more accurate you are with your cutting, the better you're going to be. And that all starts with the mat, the ruler, and your rotary blade. Because if you think about it, if you're cutting your fabric and you're getting some shredding and then it goes and starts unfraying and everything, is that truly a 2.5" strip, or is it now 2 1/4, 2 1/8? So those are a couple of tips and tricks that I would like to pass forward to you guys about getting started and different things that you can do to protect your blades, your fabric, your rulers, and your mats. If you have any questions or need any more further information, don't hesitate to give us a call. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. We have a full day for Wednesday, starting at 9 a.m. Central. Then we're back on 2 p.m. Central, and then we're back on at 4 p.m. Central. We have prizes for each time that we're going live. Something new, something fun. So don't forget to join us tomorrow. We'll see you later. Bye.